Welcome everyone to the Monday Night Live Q&A. We had a special event this last weekend. Dr. Rob was with not all of them, some of the men who have been through our program, the alumni. It was the first retreat in person, and from all reports I hear it went really well. Do you have anything you'd like to comment on?
Oh my God. If you guys think that men can't be moved, if y'all think that men can't open up in a short period of time. We had a 3-day men's alumni retreat. So these are people who were in our program who chose to, kind of weekend intensive, if you will. And they came for 3 days here in Palm Springs. Well, not here in Palm Springs. But the weather was beautiful, so beautiful. Um, yeah, and they just had experiential exercises and therapy exercises. And, I got there and I just saw they look connected. That's how they look.
Oh,
They
well,
just
and
look,
one of the things is they weren't all there at the same time, so they're
no.
connected, but not because they all were in the same group.
Well, it doesn't take long when you have an open heart.
Hmm.
Also, I think that someone who chooses to go to an alumni retreat is probably someone who is already motivated. Anyway, it was just really great. And it's also lovely for me because I've seen some of these men. Sorry, we're talking about alumni retreat. We'll catch up in a minute. I've seen some of these men 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, or 6 weeks ago. And so seeing that, I was like, hi, 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 and they all want to hug and, tell me about their progress. I have a baby now, and, things are
Oh,
going well. And yeah, so it was a really nice experience, and one I hope we'll do more for sure. We'll do
yeah.
more. We got lots of
Well,
love
just the
men.
look on your face is, and I know, I like having been to some of the Empowered Women's retreats is amazing to see what can happen in a short amount of time for those that are willing.
It might
So
also be good lighting, just to say, Tam. You never know.
no, the smile is genuine, and I can read a smile,
That's
regardless of the
true,
lighting.
especially mine.
So yeah, but we would welcome your questions again. What will probably happen at the top of the hour is that we're out of time,
Mm.
and there's a bunch more questions. So, if you have something that you'd like to ask Dr. Rob, please type it in the Q&A,
Well, I just want to tell you what a great
please.
podcast I got to do today.
Yeah, we got to chat about this. I was super excited
Wow.
about this one. So yeah.
This is a woman who specializes in something called collaborative divorce, which is kind of like mediation, but they really grow, what do you want with your kids? And how do you want not just the anger, but what vision do you each have for your own future, for your children's future, for the future? They go through every area of their lives, and they kind of come up with graphs or charts and compare. And, so it isn't a deeply emotional experience because it's not meant to be. People are going to divorce. They also do something called, I wrote it down, called, oh, I don't remember what it is, but I'll look for my thrown away piece of paper. I know it's recorded, so I know I have it. It's called, a second, they do something called discernment, which is really going through, it's like 5 exercise. We don't work with her, but she listens to a podcast. It's Sex, Love, and Addiction. Really discerning, do you want a divorce? And going through similar areas, like where do you see your kids being? Where do you see your home being? Where do you see your fine? And really helping a couple, not just kind of therapy, but it's very concrete. Like fill this out. Let's go through each area. And it's interesting because you said some couples they decide that no, they really don't want to be together. And sometimes you find out that one is in and one is out. So anyway, so her name is I'm so old I
Arlene
mean.
Rosen,
Right, Arlene Rosen.
and
She's in
and she will
Pennsylvania.
be joining on a live webinar where you can join and ask questions at the end of the month. It is posted on our special edition. I think it's the last Thursday of the month, but I'm not going to go look that up right now. But it is a special edition, and she will be
And that's on
joining.
the
So
Seeking Integrity website, if
it
you look above
is,
Tammy's head.
yes.
But I thought it was just fascinating. And it's sort of a structured way to say it's not just saying, should I go or can I stay? It's actually a much more structured way of doing that. Hold on one second. I have to just give me.
We're still waiting for questions because trust me, we can keep chatting. I've got more information to share with you as well. We have other special edition webinars coming up. Leilani Sinclair had done one on adult children, and we'd had Candace Christensen do one on neurodivergence. Candace is coming back in June. Arlene is coming in May. We have a number of them. You're muted. Was that intentional that you were muted?
I didn't want, so here's the thing about this part today, and we really have to. So if I say the word P,
Uh-huh.
See, it's that time of day. Well, no, it's not me.
Oh,
The dog
yeah.
has to go. And since we do this, she has to wait. So if I say that word, so be very careful with what I say. So I mute myself. Anyway, it's a long story. You don't need to hear it. Um,
I'm laughing. So it's all
well, you know
good.
what
So
I mean.
yes, I do. Yeah. Anyway, so we have some special edition. I just posted 4 new special edition webinars and a new drop-in that will be consistent. The Friday morning at 7:30, Yang has been doing art for healing through art. It's a guided art time for partners,
Well,
and it's going to be once a month starting in June. She's going to be um, uh, co-hosting with Linda, who does
these are free.
the
Is
groups,
that
and these are
right?
free. Yeah,
Wow.
and we tried it. She reached out to me, and it was like, and I was like, I'm game. Let's try it. And it has worked really well. It's very different, and it's just a meaningful thing. So it's different than just talking. And it was very meaningful as part of her process, and so she wanted to give back, and so she's doing that. So that's a new drop-in group offering, but there's a number of them
I
that are
just want to say,
coming.
Tammy, that we
Please.
started with one, and now we have, and these are free. Well, we have 17 or something like that. I don't even know.
I think at least, and some of these hosts have been doing this for 5 and 6 years consistently, and some of the same people are returning to those drop-in groups. So that's
Question.
really
Do you think
meaningful.
people are having difficulty coming in the chat, or so you know what we
It's
do?
not
We
a
give
chat; it's
answers.
the Q
I
and
meant the
A.
chat, or
So
yeah, the Q&A
yeah,
button. Are you having because we're here,
yeah.
ready to work. And as Tammy said, we get 14 people at the end who are not 14
I
people
can't
are
believe we have a group of no one has a question. So, but I don't
well,
have any idea. Like usually they can somebody send a test through the question. I guess that'll be. But yeah, I haven't been on
I
the
got
Zoom
one
platform.
Q&A. Oh, that's a
Oh, there we
test.
go. Yeah.
All right, one. Let me
Yeah.
think.
So there it goes.
Oh, I think.
Thank
Isn't that
you.
strange? It's
Thank
so weird
you.
because sex addict spouses, well, the guys want to, well, if they're heterosexual, the men want to ask questions about their wives. The
Hmm.
women want to ask questions about the addicts. It's inevitable.
Hmm.
So yeah, again, if you have questions about partnership and addiction and what is sex addiction and how do I not kill my partner? I mean, how do I not yell at my partner? We're here.
Whatever it is, and so you were just with the alumni and you saw, the progress that they are making. We have similar offerings for partners so that, I mean, there is healing, possible.
Well,
And lots of people are not there yet. They're in the stuck and muck. And so we want to, provide resources that are helpful for people. So,
well, that's what I wanted to say to you is that and I was saying it before, we started with 2 or 3, and these are free groups. We have, as Tammy said, under around 20 or something like that. And then there's paid groups that are work groups for sex addicts and partners, and then we have residential treatment. And now I hear we're having art exercise. I mean, we're really becoming this sort of all around treatment program
art for
online that's free.
healing.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not
So
therapy, it's art for healing.
I am worried that people that, oh, we have
We
another
have
in the
them. Yeah.
Q&A.
So here
Okay,
we
there
go.
you go.
Thank you. All right. What is the best? Oh, I love these kind of questions. What is the best approach for an addict to get radically honest with himself? We've been advised before he does any CSAT work, he should see a psychoanalyst first to get honest about his past first. Oh, goodness. Establish morals, etc., before addressing the sex addiction part. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't want to dismiss any kinds of therapy. There's Jungian therapy, there's psychoanalysis, there's psychodynamic, there's all kinds of therapy. But unless I am sober and I am working on my recovery, it's useless because I can tell you, you can have all the therapy in the world, but that doesn't stop you from acting out. That doesn't stop you from hurting your spouse. So, one of the things that I would disagree about is I think you do need to see an expert. You know, I had some heart problems and I went to see a cardiologist and I got some answers, but I had to maintain. And so I went to my regular doctor, but I had to see the expert first. And by the way, this is for same with sex addiction. I'm glad you mentioned the word CSAT. These are certified sex addiction therapists. And I think there's over 1,000 now or something like that. And we are trained over the course of, I don't know, a week and then all these follow-ups. And in other words, we know what we're doing. And I've seen people go into
150 hours
therapy.
of training. So,
Thank
yeah, it's a
you.
lot. Sorry.
That's okay. I used to teach it. And again, we
I
didn't have
know.
but anyway, the point is that people you want to work with this, not someone who's going to say, well, you just have too much sex, you don't have enough sex, or they've gained too much weight and not attractive to you anymore. I think it's really important to see someone who specializes in this. And so my answer to your question is twofold, which is yes, they should see a specialist first. And second of all, is you've got to deal with the problem. I know people are alcoholic. How are you going to deal with your emotional problems if you're drinking all the time? So those are my thoughts. And oh, by the way, morals and honesty, that comes through this work. So when I go to support groups, 12-step programs, SLAA, SAA, it demands of me rigorous honesty. I mean, and that doesn't mean, and I can be dishonest, but then my own healing doesn't go forward. So why bother? Okay.
I wanted just
Oh,
chime
I'm sorry,
in.
Tab, you were going to say something. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it. Yeah, well, unless you weren't finished, but I thought you were. So,
No,
yeah, I mean, it's like lots of people go, oh, I want to run off and go do all my trauma work and work on my all of this stuff, and like I'm like from a logical standpoint, let's see what triggers you is all of that stuff, and if you don't have any tools to be able to tolerate doing that work,
right.
guess what happens? And lots of people start working on that, and they remain in active addiction. So it's stop the problem. I always do this: stop the problematic behavior, then address the underlying issues, so that there is a plan and a path. And I love the cardiologist example. I often use, if you have cancer, you go to the cancer specialist, you don't go to
Right.
your general practitioner. And yes, there may be co-occurring other things, and if a high acuity mental health issue, like we don't
Right.
treat people on the schizophrenic scale, that just doesn't work well in our program. But otherwise, like, so if there's something in a mental health capacity that would be so so problematic that recovery was not possible unless it is addressed, then of course it's always
But
addressed.
then they
The
would go to analysis, because analysis is a
Yes,
really in-depth, and I've done it. And let me tell you, whew, that's hard work. I remember, Tammy, I was on the couch 3 days a week, but my insurance paid for it. Life was very different then, but I gained tremendously. But I didn't recovery for 5 years before I did that, and I've been in regular
thank
therapy.
you for sharing that. Yeah,
So, but oh
yeah.
no, I mean, it was what the insurance part or that's not what you
No,
meant.
but no, your journey,
I'm
but it's
kidding you
like
now.
you got you got a
I
solid
was ready.
foundation, and then yes, and that's the key to this. And so, you know,
Well, it's sort of
and
like saying,
go ahead.
when are we going to have sex again in our relationship? Well, you're not such a great idea until you get the emotional piece in place where you feel connected. So anyway, we got lots of questions. We should keep
Yes.
going.
Hey, thanks for lots of questions. Do y'all have recommendations for good resources for good communication building in the latter stages of recovery and reconciliation?
You first.
Okay, so in the latter stages of recovery and reconciliation, so yes, and it's kind of twofold. So the Out of the Doghouse for Men Have Been Caught Cheating is Dr. Rob's most popular book, and when there's a solid foundation of healing, that could be useful. Separately, there are a few people who do like a couples retreat, and that is for when
Mm.
people are really ready. So you can email me, tami@seekingintegrity.com, if you are ready for that. That means there's, not, slips and all of this kind of stuff going on.
Well, we
You're
usually
you're
ask
really
questions.
ready.
Like if I'm doing an intensive, I will say this, and I'll have to ask questions before I know
Yeah,
if you're ready. So
yeah,
that's true.
yeah.
Sorry.
But it isn't like, oh, we just had discovery 5 minutes ago and we want to work on our
Can
relationship.
you explain what discovery is? Because I don't know. Oh, I see.
Discovery,
That's
well, you
not
found
there.
out. Yeah, yeah. No, but no, this is saying this is in the deeper things, and we find many of the guys have a lot more insights when they're doing their inner child work and attachment wound work. And so those would be, work groups on our site. Good couples therapy for the two of you, doing Fanos or the Fine, check-ins. There's a number of things, but I love that you're asking this question and asking about, we're down the pike a little ways, and how do we navigate this? So Dr. Rob, here's another one. Dr. Rob and Dr. Stan Tatkin did podcast called We Do in January of 2019. And I think it's a really interesting one for like, is this the goal? And, you know, because if we have a mutually agreed upon goal that our relationship
Right.
is key, then what are the pieces that we need to do to, you know, and there's lots of different things. And, you know, what works for you may be a little different than somebody else. But, you know, I love that you're here and you're asking the question and, you know, that feels like a hopeful thing and healing. So, other
A
thoughts?
couple of things I just want to say because I know you're putting in the type, but people are put it in the chat. It is the podcast is called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And I say that for those of you who aren't live, so you know what it is. And I think we have almost 2 million people who've downloaded it. So I guess people are struggling with this a lot. Um, I'll give you the most basic thing. Well, two things. Number one is what Tammy said about this podcast, and I'm gonna give it away. One of the most meaningful things I heard was where I heard the decisions you make in your relationship need to be for us. When I think to myself, do I want to buy this car, or do I want to spend a weekend with this friend? I don't think about what I want to do. I think about, well, I might, but then I think about what is best for us. And I tell you, and I said to Tammy, I go to the store and I had to buy a shirt, and I'm always thinking about, well, my husband won 24 years together. I kind of know, but it's hard to keep them out of my head. And I think that's what really good healing is. It's not that you're the same person, but you're always considering them. And I think that's great recovery because you're going to go act out with porn or in whatever way, sex workers. A good question is this going to be good for us? Because I think the answer is pretty much going to be no. I don't know where you are, but I'll just say something very simple, very, very simple, which is how often are you sitting and just talking with each other? And I think honestly, if you have, and I mean in a concrete way. So every other night, we are on our calendar when we're done with dinner, before we, get online and watch fun movies, we're going to sit and talk to each other. And you're going to tell me for 15 minutes what's on with you. I'm going to tell what's going on with me, what's on with you, and do some reflection. And just that. Because later signs of recovery, by the way, I don't know what that means. Later signs of recovery could be reconciliation, could be 6 months, it could be 6 years. So there's one other thing that I picked out of this that I want to be careful about, which is the later stages of recovery. I'm never in the later stages of recovery. Recovery is my whole life. It is something that I do forever. So I'd like to say, well, I'm older and I'm in the later stages. No, my body is in the later stages, but my recovery is always going to be fresh. It's always going to be something I have to re-examine. Maybe not in the same way I did 20 years ago, but nonetheless, recovery is it's a way of living. And so I don't mean to be, picky or anything, but I just want everyone to hear there is no late stage recovery, no offense, because it's a lifelong journey. So there you go.
And I agree with that, but there's also the crisis stage. And I hear that this couple is not in a crisis and that,
Right.
and so looking for tools now,
You're right.
what
You're
now?
absolutely right.
I'm with him, like it's one day at a time. So, okay. How can I work to regain trust after a recent relapse? Oh, after recent relapses with an S, it's multiple.
Okay, I'm not quite in the same place, so we're looking at different
I'm in the
things.
open. It's
Oh,
at
okay, you're in the
509.
open.
Yeah, yeah, I'm
Okay,
staying because
509. Thank
yeah,
you
you
very
were,
much.
yeah.
510, 509. I only have how do I work regain, sorry, how can I work to regain trust after a recent relapse?
No, after recent relapses. That's what I
Okay,
said. It's
so
multiple. So,
first of all, I just want to say what a relapse is,
mhm.
because I want to be clear about that. And I'm not saying anyone's going to feel good about it, but let's say my problem is I go to massage parlors or I look at a lot of porn. Not a lot, but it's a problem. And I've really been doing well and I've really been working on this. And then I look at the porn again. And then I immediately talk about it, tell you about it, get support for it, and recommit to healing. That's called a slip. Meaning, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it happened once. And I immediately said, oh my God, this is really a problem I got to deal with. And I do the right thing, and that actually is the most important thing, which is I don't keep it to myself because that's an opportunity to do it some more. Well, no one knew, so maybe I can do it again. But I immediately let everyone know in my world. And I want to say something you spouses should. Well, let me see what relapse is. Relapse is when you do something like that and you don't tell anyone, and now it's your own little secret. And now you do it again, and now you do it again. And so it's a whole series of continuing a behavior. So the reason I said that is someone says recent relapses. Does that mean that happened once and 6 months later, or does it mean they're consistently in an experience of it? I don't think you should have trust for a while, and I'm not sure what trust means to you. And Tammy, I guess I want to approach you with this one, but um, if someone was continuously acting out and we had a real commitment to change, I'm not sure I'm not sure I trust them even at the beginning. So how do you speak to that?
To me, this is what are your actions? What are you doing that would show that things are different? Because, oh, I learned my lesson. I'll never do it again. That's, and you may even believe that, but how can I work to regain trust after recent relapses? If what you were doing wasn't enough, up the level. Dr. Rob has talked about this before. If
Right.
you were going to a couple of 12-step meetings a week, maybe you need to commit to 90 and 90 again. If you haven't been digging into the 12 steps, you haven't been doing your step work and meeting with your sponsor, probably time to do that. If you've been slacking off on seeing your therapist, like, oh, I was seeing them weekly and now I'm seeing them once a month, want to save the money. I love that one. I want to save money. And, your
You talk
relationship
about the
crashes and
addict.
burns. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm reading. If they're looking to regain
Right.
this, so this is from an addict perspective. So this is, what are your actions? In 12 step, we talk about into action. So what are your actions showing that would give your partner any belief that, you could possibly be working to change? And you can, everything is an opportunity. So if that wasn't working, clearly you zoomed through your middle circle behavior. So what do you need to do so that when you're in your middle circle, you go to your outer circle rather than sliding on through? So, and honestly, if this has been an ongoing pattern, we have a residential treatment program, and it doesn't have to be like you're in crisis right now. But when people can't get a solid foundation, get that traction in recovery, that might be exactly what you need. And some people go, oh, I can't take the time away, I can't afford it, I can't whatever. Can your relationship tolerate?
Lawyers are more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. We did a series.
I did
But
want to say one thing. Oh, I'm
go ahead.
sorry, Tammy.
Well,
Well, I want to say it from both perspectives, which is I
mhm.
was a spouse and my addict partner was in constant relapse, and I was trying to regain trust. And I think it can be worked from both sides, Tammy. I really hope that you attend some of the free groups, because you're not the only spouse who's in this situation, and you're not the only one. So if you are a spouse, I don't think regaining trust is just and by the way, we're talking about this at a conference coming up. If you're regaining, I'll give you a different example. I hear, when are they going to forgive me? Well, forgive me isn't an on and off switch. It takes time. It goes through all kinds of stages. So regaining trust may not be in myself or someone else. Something just happens. It may happen. It's like grief. First I feel angry, then I feel awful, so in any case, we have now, I hate this. We have 11 questions now, so
I
we
know,
should
and we
keep
won't
going
get to them
through.
all, so we
That's
will.
okay.
But yeah, yeah. Okay, so the next question, Dr. Rob, is betrayer here. From your seeking integrity perspective, what is the best way to start the amends process with my betrayed spouse? A verbal opening of the wrongs I think I've caused her, or asking her what her experience has been, and then go from there. Just not sure to literally how to start that process. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Tammy's having a feeling.
I
You want to say
am
something about
like
that
this.
feeling,
This feels
Tammy?
like I'm trying to do it myself, and like, yeah,
Hmm.
please don't, you know, running around saying sorry. I just said action. It's your actions, and making amends is the eighth and ninth steps. This is not the first one. Like, so if, please talk to your sponsor, please talk to your qualified therapist. I don't, if you haven't done a formal therapeutic disclosure, that would, all of that would come after that. And there's a process, and it would be guided by qualified professionals. Often for addicts, it is, I want to feel better, and I want my spouse to feel better, so I want to go sorry, 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 sorry. And Dr. Rob has said this 1,000 times on webinars. Trust is rebuilt over time. You're a living amends is, we act differently. We don't, we aren't just giving lip service to it, and our actions aren't like, well, I said I was never going to do that, and then I relapse again. So yeah, I have like, there's no quick fix. So I
Well,
will
I
turn it over to
really like
you.
what you said, Tammy, and I talk to couples, like I do consultations online. I talk to couples like this all the time, which is I actually we have an alumni, we have a bunch of guys who've been through the program, and after they've left the residential program, we meet with them for a while to secure them and support them, rather than just kind of finishing treatment and going away. And one of the things that came up today, one of the guys said that his wife was upset about something. He was upset. He went out and talked to a friend or whatever, and he came back upset. Had a difficult conversation with his friend, and his wife looked at him upset, and she said, "I feel really uncomfortable when you're upset." And he proceeded to try to convince her, well, I was just with a friend. And I was just with a friend and we had a difficult conversation. That didn't make her feel any better. What she needed to hear was, I can only imagine how scared you get when I go out and I come back looking upset. So making amends, I think, is really not trying to reassure someone, but trying to understand from their perspective. And I really like what you wrote. And this is, by the way, and by the way, I just want you to know, if you think I'm selling something, I get 10 cents. If you're an author, you get 10 cents for every book you sell. But in any case, Out of the Doghouse was something I wrote specifically for people to try to understand, how do I regain trust? What are the things I need to say and do? But I don't hear, there's a lot of pieces missing in this, Tammy. What are you doing? Are you seeing a professional? If you're not able to see a professional, are you each going to support groups, not together? How are you? Because you're not the only one. I want to say that all evening. There are other people who are trying to figure out how to make an amends. And is this the time? There are other people who are saying, I don't know if I can believe anything they say. So I don't care if you don't have a dime or you have gazillions of dollars. We have free groups for partners, for older partners, for younger partners, for all. Go attend, listen to what other people have to say. You don't have to do this on your own. And Tammy said, from all the
You
way
shouldn't do
from,
it.
if
Yeah.
you're a mess, feel free to join us and you can spend a few weeks with us. But I wonder where you are that you feel that it is time to make some kind of an amends, because I don't know where you are. Have you been working this for a year? Have you worked in this for 3 years? Have you had guidance? I can imagine if it just happened, you want to make them feel better right now. And I want to say, my desire to make you feel better is often for me. You know, you look really upset. Let me tell you this, this, and this, and you won't be upset anymore. That's not going to help. What's going to help is, I don't know what you're going through. I've hurt you so much. I'm trying to understand what that person is really going through. And when I try to reassure you, I don't know about those of you who've been reassured. I said to him, have you ever reassured her before and you weren't being honest? He said, well, I actually have. Show me everything you're saying. So, a lot of questions that are interesting, Tam, in
Yes.
terms of the
I know.
future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why do betrayers have to have so wait, why do the betrayers have to so porn addiction
Mhm.
101? Go to sex
These are
addiction
our
101.
classes.
Yeah. So yeah, my husband has been porn free for 9 months now and he claims he has no urges. Woohoo, that he no longer watching people have sex on screen. Now I'd like to encourage him to sign up for other programs with Seeking Integrity that he learns how to engage with an adult. So there's a misperception here. Um, so Dr. Rob mentioned the Out of the Doghouse work group. We have lots of guys who have no abstinence and they are going, I want my spouse to, yeah, like, I want her to quit being mad at me. So they run into, Out of the Doghouse, but they haven't got a solid foundation of recovery. So if he, if so he's been 9 months, porn free. That's recovery takes, 2 to 5 years. I don't know what he's been doing. If he just quit, I would be suspect. But I want you to understand there isn't a requirement that you do those two, but often people are trying to do the, higher level stuff.
How to
And
get
that's,
you to forgive me, one.
yeah, yeah. And it's
Right.
kind of like, or I want to do my attachment wounds and I'm still acting out every day, it doesn't work, so we want you to have a solid foundation and then you can and do those, and some of that stuff can be triggering. If you're talking about your inner child, it can be triggering. So you got a solid foundation, you're supported, you got a support network, you won't relapse, but I hear what you're saying, that he's no longer watching porn and claims he has no urges. Like,
Can I jump in there? Because I really,
please.
so this is exactly what we were talking about just before, which is, I want you to feel better. So I'm going to tell you what you want to hear. And absolutely, I'm going to tell you, because you want to hear it, that I never think about it anymore, that this has gone away, well, let me tell you, I hope that your partner is, or sort of, I hope the addicts here, and I hope they're not, because I'm going to use this word, they're lying. I have been doing this for 30 years on my own recovery. And trust me, some people I see running, I live in California, the weather's getting better. People run by with their shirts off or their ninnies on. And I think, oh, that would be great. So I still have urges. I mean, part of the problem is how do I manage those? It's not about having them. I don't ever stop having them. I have diabetes. I don't stop having diabetes, but I learned how to not hurt myself and do the things I'm supposed to do so I don't get sick. Someone who says to you, I don't have any urges anymore. I don't believe them. I don't believe them. And I understand, and I feel bad for you because he's not watching people on the screen. I don't think that's the place I would want to be either. I think this person's probably doing this for a while and they've been lying for a while. So just because you want the partners now, just because you want to feel closer and you're really hopeful and you're hearing what you're hoping to hear, I don't know. If I were this person and if I really felt like, oh, if I were a spouse, what would make me feel better is my spouse has been porn, my husband's been porn free for 9 months now, and he really feels like the work that he's doing is making it easier with the things he's struggling with. But once I hear I'm done, I'm finished, I got this, I'm recovered, that's when I think, I mean, we have residential treatment, right? And the men who are there for 3 or 4 weeks, when they are leaving and they say, I got this, your treatment program was great. I really appreciate it. I worry about those guys. And the ones who leave treatment and they say, I'm really worried. I worry about how I'm going to do out there. I worry that I'm going to be alone. I won't get the support. I feel good about those people. You should be worried because there is no way in time that I could say absolutely, completely not as an addict. And I bet Tammy, with God's grace, you have a couple of issues with addiction, and I bet they show up sometimes. And whatever they are, whatever the behavior or substance, and you said to me recently, I'm going to say this really quick. I have been working really hard to lose weight, and I've lost a bunch of weight. And I was like, oh, Tammy, this is great. I'm really feeling, and you said it's not about the weight. It's about how you feel about yourself and about how your self-esteem. And so I don't think it's about I'm fixed and this is over. It's not about ultimately about the porn. It's about how am I in a place where I can accept that I still have this problem, that I'll always have this problem. So anyway, we got to keep going, but that one really
Yes. Yeah, I
got
know.
me.
There are, like you said, good questions. Betrayed spouse here. After a marriage of over 40 years, my husband found a girlfriend about 2 months after I left our home. He kept her a secret for several months, and it was devastating to me. Now, as he is pushing her on the family, and our grandchildren are meeting her grandchildren, etc. This is so
Oof.
painful for me. It's almost 2 years from D-Day. How should I deal with him inviting her to family events? It hasn't happened yet, but I don't know how I can handle it. I'm just starting to get my feet under me.
Well, I wanted to say a couple of things, and probably we're going to have to go more quickly, Tammy, is
I
there's a
know.
couple of things here. I doubt that your husband found someone 2 months after you separated from being in the home together. I doubt it. I would imagine there was something going on for a long time. I'm just guessing. I would not well, I would just, I'm not sure I'd bring someone to my house, but this doesn't feel like someone who has really taken the time to make choices about I don't leave you and then start dating someone unless I've already been seeing them. So I think there's something here that makes me uncomfortable. This also goes back, I think, to me to the very conversation I had today about what is separation. What are your rules? What are my rules? What are we negotiating? Because I don't just think it's we're going to separate or we're going to leave or whatever it is. It's what is going to be best for the family. What do you think it is? What do I think it is? What is going to be best for our spiritual life? Is this or that? When you have financial issues, what do you think is going to be? I've heard spouses, I'm going to take every penny you have. I understand that, but your husband might be parenting. How is he going to take care of your children if you take every penny? So I think it's a lot about, of course it's painful. And by the way, it sounds like this is unexpected to you. Again, this should be something that you have already negotiated about what this separation is going to look like. And and by the way, the person who brings them to their grandkids, I don't know. I mean, uh, what is it? Her on the family and our grandchildren. There, to me, it's a whole series of things that could happen long before I'm going to introduce someone to my grandkids. So it's like, here's the conundrum. If it's been 2 months, why are you introducing me to your grandchildren? And if it hasn't been 2 months, then something else has happened. So, yeah, I don't buy it. Cami, And we should go quick. So,
Well, I know, but I put the Empowered Women's Retreat because I think that would be, because that's what I hear
and
is the
how do they
hurt for
find it?
you. And I put the link in the chat. It's on the
Seekingintegrity.com for those of you who are not watching. Go ahead, Tammy.
okay. No, I'll go to the next one. So
No, you were talking
no,
about
no,
women's
no, it's
retreat.
okay.
I just wanted to make sure that
No, it's
people
fine.
can't
We're
see it.
good. I
Okay.
understand. I was going to say it too. So it's all good. My husband attended residential treatment. He's been home for 5 weeks doing 90 meetings in 90 days. Our relationship is in safe harbor for now. We're not trying to work on it until sobriety is established. He's done some yellow circle behaviors in the last few days. I just want to not care. I'm trying to sit back and observe. I have really good and clear boundaries and I know how to take care of myself. But what does loving detachment really look like? How do I not feel these waves of grief when I see yellow circle behaviors?
Let me just stop for a moment and say, Tammy, I'm truly sorry.
No, no, no.
No,
It's
no, no.
all
Let me
good.
let me say this.
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
talking. You don't hide your frustration very well, and you looked unhappy. And I think it's important for all of you to see that one of us stopped and said, "Wait a minute, I care about you," and I said something that upsets you, and I'm not going to. Neither one of us are going to pretend that that didn't happen. I love you, Tammy. I care
Thank
about you,
you.
and I interrupted you, and I am so, so sorry. Um,
And we mutually had a desire to get the information out and you did. So thank
I
you.
thank you.
Apology accepted and thank you. So,
Yeah, and we
and I know
noticed,
we're in
and
a
we
short time frame. So yeah.
yes, but this may be the best lesson of all, is we don't pretend that everything's fine. I see your face and say, I care about you. No, you're not going to say it's fine. I care about you. We're going to talk about it. So anyway, that is that. Um, so just so people know yellow circle behaviors, basically in treatment, we look at what is absolutely acting out. What is, I saw this person, I did this behavior. And then there's another group of things that we look at, which is when are you in danger? For example, I drove down the street, or I was looking at things online that weren't quite porn, or I called somebody I shouldn't be calling, or I started smoking cigarettes, whatever it is, we look at that as a warning. So if you see your partner doing something that is a warning, um, loving detachment means I don't feel comfortable. I need to take a step back. Um, it's like a therapist when I'm working with someone and they've really solidly getting recovery. We start talking about trauma and other things, but they haven't. That's all we talk about. So to me, loving attachment is first of all, trust your gut. If this makes you uncomfortable, I think it is something that makes you uncomfortable and you should pay attention. And I'm so glad, by the way, we have clear boundaries. So one of my questions to you, because this would be a boundary, is this is what a boundary is, something a way I take care of myself. If I see you engage in this behaviors, how am I going to take care of myself? I'm not going to tell you it's good or bad or right or wrong, but it leaves me uncomfortable. So the question really is, how do I take care of myself when I see these kinds of things going on? Tammy?
I put the boundaries work group in and I hear you have healthy boundaries. I don't know where he went to treatment and how long he was there, but I'm thinking this is very early in the process. He's doing 90 meetings in 90 days after residential treatment and he's been home for 5 weeks. So let's say it's within the first,
Mhm.
5 or 6 months of him being abstinent and you're seeing problematic behaviors, you're seeing things digress. So we talked earlier about, if what I'm doing isn't enough, I need to up what I'm doing. So he's doing 90 meetings in 90 days. Is he working the steps? How often is he meeting with his sponsor? You can warm a seat in a meeting. So, but I really, want you to hold on to what do you need to do to regulate you? And he's on his journey and he may have to learn some rough lessons, which will negatively impact you too. He may choose to act out. I don't know. I'm not, but if he does, if the worst thing happens, what are you going to do to take care of you so that, this isn't so devastating for you? Of course it's devastating, but, you staying regulated, the only person we have control over is ourselves. So other
I want
thoughts?
to say to
Yeah,
you,
please.
you don't have to sit back and observe. This isn't, you get to have feelings. I think some people think, well, I can't get too upset with them. They might act out. Or I can't, look like I don't trust them. Look, these are your feelings. And this is a natural, logical conclusion or response to what this person is doing. If I was throwing rocks at someone and then I threw a rock on the ground, I would expect them to back up. Um, I, I don't think this idea of neutrality, and I don't know where they went to treatment, but I can tell you if they went to treatment with us, we would not say to a partner, well, you just need to, be calm, let them have that moment and not
No,
get involved. Now, it is true that you don't get involved with them. You don't say you need to do this and you need to do that.
that's where, yes.
Go
You,
ahead.
yes, no, I'm sorry, but that's what I meant by, we have no control over what the other person is going to do. So, so please.
However, if you back away, you don't back away to prove something or to make them, you do it because you don't feel comfortable and you need to take care of you. And so I don't like this, loving detachment. I think I don't think there's ever loving detachment. There is dealing with what's happening in the moment, however I feel. So, yeah.
And before you leave that question, so can you just briefly talk about from a codependent lens? It isn't just detached, it,
Mm.
we aren't independent, we're interdependent. So can you share
Well,
briefly how you would look at it?
I don't like the idea of codependency because I think it blames partners. You love someone, you care about them, they've struggled, they haven't struggled. You don't leave because, or you don't, however you're acting is not, let me say it easily. I am not responsible for someone else's behavior ever. There's nothing wrong with me for being angry at them, for being disappointed at them. It's not that there's something wrong with me. These are my feelings. And so when someone says, "Oh, you're so reactive to their problem, you should calm down," to me, that sounds like there's something wrong with me for getting upset. And so I have a whole view of it. And I wrote a book called Prodependence, which is, by the way, a lot of therapists are reading because they don't like this idea of let's blame the partner, let's blame the spouse for not being calmer, for being too involved. And I'll say, I talked to that therapist today, to Arlene today, and she had read the book. She said, one of the things, she said, the first thing I saw, I knew it was meaningful. She said, when I read, if you have cancer, and that spouse gives up their whole life to take care of you. They stop working, they gain 40 pounds, they're a mess. You wouldn't say what's wrong with them. You would say how wonderful that they're so supportive. But if your partner has addiction, there's something wrong with you for giving them so much attention. This is a disorder. This is a disease. So please don't get upset with yourself for feeling so upset. And by the way, I want to say one more time, there is nothing, you hear this, partners, there's nothing you can ever, ever do to make me act out. Tammy was not Tammy. Well, I don't want to speak your recovery. Let's speak for someone else. I will say to as an addict, well, if you just hadn't done this, and if you just weren't so angry with me, and if you just if I make you miserable, if I make you upset, you can leave me. You can go see a therapist. You can go for a walk. But to say it's your fault for my actions, that is an attempt to push to look over there and say, look at the red herring over there. It's your fault. It is never a partner's fault. And you should never take responsibility for your spouse's behavior. They're going to do whatever they're going to do. And if they do it, they're going to blame you. And that is not something that has anything to do with you. They did it because they wanted to. They did it because they wanted to.
Okay.
Okay.
There's more on that, but we're going to keep moving. Okay. Okay. First of all, thank you so much for making this accessible to all. Therapy is expensive and definitely not accessible to everyone. Can addicts and partners heal outside of the therapeutic setting?
Well, to me, that honors you and I, Tammy, because when we started this, we talked about having one of those pay for sites where you have to pay to sign in. And we do a lot of recommended therapy, but I got to tell you, I know that a very small percentage of people who hear us will be able to afford therapy, will be able to have the time for therapy. I don't think everyone has that opportunity. All the podcasts, all the work groups, all the things that we do, and I mean it. What did Tammy say? How many videos and webinars? How much do we have recorded? I don't think you could count.
Well, I estimate on the low end probably 3,000 hours of videos. I have a feeling it's higher, but I think that is solid. And there's probably, I don't even know, probably 150 to 200 podcasts, maybe more. I should actually check. I will.
So when you're driving the car, when books can be difficult, but when can you have time? Listen to the podcast. This is why we do this stuff for free. When we don't get anything out of asking the therapist friends of ours to oversee and moderate groups, it makes them feel good because they're giving something away. The work that we do, sure. If 5% of you, 10% of you say, oh, this is amazing, I'm going to go to treatment, I'm going to their center, great, we appreciate that. But that's going to pay for the 90% who can't afford it. It is very important. I'm a social worker by training. It is very important to me that everyone have the opportunity to heal. And that is why do as many groups as you can, learn as much as you can, listen back and forth. This is what upsets me. I've had couples sit in the car and say, the podcast is playing Sex, Love, and Addiction. And I've had a spouse say, well, that's the thing that upsets me. He just said that thing that upsets me. Let me play that back for you so you understand. So, yeah, I mean, you cannot get more. There are couples groups for people in recovery, our Recovering Couples
RCA.
Anonymous. So, we talk about it a lot because we have that option. But trust me, if it's just our work, there's so many opportunities to heal. And I wouldn't look up and say, oh gosh, I can't afford therapy. I'll never get there. I don't think that's true. It may take more effort and more focus, but you can do it. And by the way, we say, Tammy, that most alcoholics never went to therapy, but somehow they managed to get sober. I think couples can work through these issues without a therapist, but you have to be dedicated to the process. And it takes a while.
And 12 step is free. It still is. I mean,
Right.
research
Sorry.
shows that, it is still the best thing you can do for long-term recovery. Yeah, engage. And the only other thing I was going to add is stick with the winners. There's a lot of toxic out there. Like there are, addicts that want to be your sponsor and they are slipping every other week. There are partners that just want to stay stuck. So if you want to be on a healing journey, you want to have things different, find the people that are doing so themselves. Okay,
And
next
I'll say
question.
something again
Well,
about
yeah,
the free
yeah,
groups.
yeah.
All these free hours of education. It's not just me and Tammy. It's
Oh, yeah.
it's dozens and dozens and dozens of therapists who've been willing to sit down for an hour and discuss something or discuss three. So you can hear a lot of perspectives. But we don't pick people to do free stuff unless we feel safe and trust that we have trust in them.
Yes.
I love the next question because it's a
What
therapy
is the
question.
correlation between sex addiction and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder? Do most addicts have undiagnosed OCD?
I think it is very rare for a sex addict of OCD. I run a treatment program, obsessive compulsive disorder. I have been doing this work as a mental health worker for almost 3 decades. And do they come in? Absolutely. But I have worked with people who have OCD and they're not addicts, and so let me just explain the difference between an obsession and a compulsion. Obsession and addict. So sorry, obsession and addiction.
Mhm.
People are obsessive. They are anxious, and they count the lines on the road. They look and see how many buttons you have. They're feel driven to repeat something over and over again. They're checking the stove. They're washing their hands. They're doing something to feel calm down, but it's not any fun. Addicts do something because they want to do, and they're escaping emotionally, but they enjoy it. Now, there are correlations that we've documented between ADHD, between hyperactivity disorders. There's about a 10% correlation, something like that. But I
I think
think
so,
that
yeah.
I think for someone to say, oh, that's really compulsive behavior, that must mean it has to be in multiple areas. It can't just be this. So, by the way, go get a diagnosis. You don't have to ask this question. Even if you go online and look at legitimate OCD programs that have questions and you can learn. But I also think what I hear is, oh, it'd be so nice if I could just put it on that. If it was this diagnosis, then, well, they just need to be treated for, it's just about depression. This is its own thing, separate from everything else. Do people have underlying issues? Sure. Is that the driver for their addictive behavior? No, but every addict would like to think so if I could just take that pill. So anyway, it's very small correlation in terms of obsessive compulsive disorder.
But does go to having a proper diagnosis and having someone who understands both addiction and whatever other mental health condition could be present. We have clients that come to our residential treatment program with undiagnosed somethings, and
Right. A lot
we
of,
have specialists. Yeah, but we have specialists who are trained to identify both the addiction and other aspects to be able to parse that out. Okay, so the next one, betrayed partner. It has been 1 year since D-Day, and I forgave once he committed to work on the relationship and himself. We also did couples therapy. How do I feel safe even though I have forgiven him? I feel guilty sometimes for bringing up past issues.
I mean, this is a Tammy question.
Oh gosh, I feel like, okay, so forgiveness is a process, and forgiveness is for me, not for the other person. The other person can feel better if I say, I forgive you. But forgiveness is a process. And here's the other thing. What I hear is you said the words, I forgive you.
Right.
I kind of wonder if you really did. And I wonder what he has done. I'm using he and she has done to earn your trust. That's kind of where I wonder. And you don't feel safe, so trust is rebuilt over time. We just said that a little while ago. What is he doing to build your trust? Rather than focusing on the forgiveness. So I'll share. Angela Spearman did a really good two-part webinar at the beginning, at the end of January and the beginning of February. It's recorded in our previously recorded webinars, and she talked about resentment and forgiveness. But I'm also curious about your guilt because, so let me switch it. For addicts, we will not regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. So this is not about, forgetting the past. And what have you done to process through? It is not forgive and forget. Oh, forgive you, forget. We'll pretend like that never happened. That's every addict's dream, by the way. So what are you doing to process through this? Somebody else mentioned earlier the grief, and grief is a couple years of usually, and I mean, there's extenuating things, but grief is a process. There's anger, there's all of these different stages of the grief process, and guilt can be part of that, shame. So what are you doing to support your healing for the grief? So thoughts?
A couple of quick things. I don't know what it means for bringing up past issues. It's one thing to say, it's something to yell at someone and say, by the way, what you did is, and over again. I do think that, and for example, someone has said, I see you doing some tricky behaviors. It sent me right back to being mistrustful. Uh, I would feel guilty because my fear is that they would see me as not trusting them or not bring. I do want to say something about the stages. So, and I'll say it for me because I've said this here before. My sister unfortunately died of COVID in early 2020. What was it, 2021 or something like that? I forget COVID now. But
Yeah, I think it was 2021.
and she lived in Palm Springs and she was retired. And this weekend I went to our alumni weekend, which was in Palm Springs. Now I thought I mean, that was years ago. I thought, well, I've grieved my sister and I got to tell you, on the way out there, I was very tearful because
Mm,
I remembered how I felt about her, and it was sort of seeing the light there, feeling that, the drive I used to go visit her. Am I done grieving her? I'll never be done grieving her. Will you absolutely forgive someone and say, okay, I've forgiven them? And I would look this up. There are stages of forgiveness. You can go look it up and look it on at Amazon or something on books and say, what are the stages of forgiveness? It is not a black and white on and off process. It will come and go, and something will happen that will bring up the past. And, I said I forgive you, but the truth is there's still this other piece. I do think, though, it's important not just throw it in their face, because your guilt about, why are you throwing that up in the air? Is it because you feel unsafe? You're feeling unsafe is something you have to take care of yourself. So where are you coming from when you bring that up? But I do think, and I want everyone to hear it, forgive is not an on. Boy, do addicts want forgiveness. It is not an on-off process like a light. Some part of me will always mistrust you. Some part of me will always unsafe, and that's part of this process. The relationship will never be like it was. So we got time for a little bit more. Let's go.
So I wanted the person that said their spouse does not have any urges. She says, I'm not using genders. I actually wish he would admit that he has urges. So if you're
Hmm.
an addict person listening here and you think that just by going, nope, nope, no urges, your spouse would actually prefer you to be honest.
And they know you're not.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So what tools can an addict use to practice empathy with their partner?
Okay, this is an easy question. I did, and I wrote a book on this, which is called Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. It is broader than this. Actually, it is literally, how do I rebuild my relationship? I don't know how. We teach a course in Out of the Doghouse, which is literally, how do you sit down? I mentioned it earlier. The guy who came home upset, and his spouse said, "What's upsetting you?" And he said, "No, I'm fine, fine, fine. Don't worry about it." That's not empathy. Empathy is compassion for how you're feeling. I did this before. You must be hurting. So part of it, though, I would look for your reason, which is you want to practice empathy so they'll forgive you. Um, so uh, there are no other books that I know of about how a man who's cheated can begin to find a way to what was the question? To practice empathy. By the way, it isn't just an addiction issue. It's how can I be empathic to any day that you're anything that's going on with you? How can I, and what is empathy? It's sitting in your shoes and saying, I know how you feel. Sympathy, by the way, is I feel bad for you. I'm sorry that happened to you. Your mom died. That's terrible. Empathy is, my mom died recently, and I can only imagine how you feel about it. Um, so we have time for one more, maybe two more. My dog has
Let's
to go
see.
out.
Okay. Could you please recommend any good resources for all CSATs couples being on the same page regarding key terms? Specifically, sometimes it appears there's confusion that comes up around how sobriety or recovery is defined, as this can change over time as the essay's maturity and honesty with themselves grows. Is active addiction defined just by the inner and or red circle plan defined by essay and with CSAT, or could they still not be in good recovery or even in addiction due to blind spots? Appreciating resources. Thank you.
There are 5 questions in there.
I know, and
So
I've got resources for a bunch of them. So
So let me just say this, and I will say it from a single person's perspective. I'm not single, but if I'm single and I'm working on healing and I'm not dating and I haven't been with anyone else, does that mean that I can never masturbate again? Well, maybe in the first year it's not a good idea, but it may be over time. So things do change. How I look at my recovery, something I could walk by that I could never walk by before. Can I now walk by there? If I'm talking to other people and getting support, sure. So I think that, and I don't know what maturity and honesty is, because to me, we all struggle with that. But I do hear something that I think you should address, Tammy, which is I've had a problem of someone is going to this therapist and they think, oh, this is that. And the other therapist says, no, that is this. And so I'm wondering, first of all, you can refer and say to people, here's someone I think is aligned. But what do you tell people who are dealing with that kind of thing?
it is really challenging, and you're right. The language gets thrown around. Um, I'm not as hard edged as a friend of mine. He always told his clients, he's a therapist, that the first 90 days was just abstinence. They couldn't even say they were sober. And I was like, ooh, like I always want to count every single day. But I often talk about abstinence is just not doing the behaviors we weren't supposed to do. Lots of people go, oh, my spouse has been in recovery for 3 weeks. And I'm like, what does that mean? Recovery takes 2 to 5 years. And so I think recovery and sobriety and abstinence all get intermingled, and it would be good to understand what is their definition. Here's the big thing is, what is the treatment plan? And if there's alignment on what the treatment plan is, they may be using some terms interchangeably, but if the treatment plan is solid and makes sense for the two of you, maybe don't get so caught up in the semantics. I work really hard to refer only to therapists that are working from a codependent lens. Every now and then I hear from somebody that they were, all about the codependency. And guess what? Then I don't refer to that person anymore. So I do research and check. But anyway, it's one of those things where it is important that you have a team that is working for your benefit. And if you are feeling like there's one of the cogs is not right, I would address it first, and maybe it's just, they're slipping through language. But if it's one of those things where they're really in a very different place and that doesn't feel like that treatment plan is going to be the most optimal for you, then it may be time to explore other options for either individual or for the couples. If you have two good individual therapists, they can do conjoint couples therapy. If you guys both are feeling really good about that, that is an option. So that might help. But thoughts?
But I just have a couple of concrete ideas.
Mm-hmm.
If I were in that situation, I would sit down and I would write a note saying, these are the things I'm concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
And I would sit my husband or wife and I would say, are you concerned about these things? Or what do you think we're disagreeing on? I'd make a copy and I think they should bring it to their therapist and you should bring it to yours. And so that each one of them hears about the confusion and that it's aligned. Because I might say, and by the way, I don't know if you know this to have an addicts lie sometimes. And so I might be
I've
in
heard that.
therapy and I don't like what they're saying about my partner. So I just go home and said, oh, they never said that. So there's interpretation through an addict's eyes and what's the reality. But if there really is a question about what terms are you guys using and all of that, write it down, share your questions, and have each of you give it to your therapist. Let them answer, they can write back and you can sit down and compare notes. So the more concrete, and Tammy's right, it'd be great if both of you said, I don't feel comfortably, could you guys talk to each other? And then you get a signed release and they can talk to each other. But they need to know, what is the disagreement about concretely? Can we do one more, Tammy? We can.
We can, and we've got two questions that are tied to therapeutic separation. So, so the first, and we're having a special edition webinar on it, so I do want to bring that up. The husband is in sobriety for over a year, been in home therapeutic separation for 2 months after constant dishonesty. His behavior is escalating, such as blame shifting and defensiveness, causing a lot of tension in the home. What should I do next?
And this is the first one, right?
This is the first one,
So,
and two down is therapy
right.
separation agreement. And I kind of, let me actually read it because they're tied together. This is helpful. What are the steps and resources to make a therapeutic separation agreement? Can it be done after the separation has happened? For the first question, I'd be curious, what was the agreement? What is your agreement, a document that was agreed to by the two of you for your in-home separation? That would be important, that you are mutually agreed upon. And then what the consequences, like a boundary, if this is not working, what are we going to do? So thoughts?
Well, it's interesting because, again, I talked to Arlene Rosen today and we talked about it. We talked about, what if a couple can't afford, don't have the ability to separate and go to separate homes? You can sit down and write rules. You know, I go into this room during this time of day. I have breakfast during this time. That you actually, and that's what I hear here is there's lack of concrete. You know, there's not. So if you're living together, or you're not living together, what are our rules together about what choices are we going to make around family? What choices are we going to make around? I'm concerned about. If you're in an in-home therapeutic separation and you see that person's behavior, what do you do for yourself? I would imagine you back away further. Maybe you say, we're just going to talk about breakfast and dinner. We're not talking about anything meaningful because I don't feel safe when we talk about things. There are a lot of ways to just, by the way, I hope you're not sleeping together. I hear couples all the time, well, with us and blah, 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 and we're in, but they're sleeping together. By the way, you don't have to sleep in the same bed. If you don't feel comfortable, and you certainly have to have sex with someone, there are many, many ways to have an in-home separation. And if there's tension, I would distance myself because you don't need to be more tense in this nightmare. Okay. And then there's what are the stages and resources to make a therapeutic agreement? Of course, you can go back and redo it. Absolutely. At any point, you can say, you know what? And you, by the way, Arlene Rosen's, can you give them her website or type them in? So
Yeah,
I'll just tell you. Go
well,
ahead.
that's one thing, but we have a webinar coming for therapeutic separation. There's a new workbook that's coming out, and Dr. Rob is going to do a podcast too. Lindsay Stanley and Stevie Hall. I think it's later this month. I didn't quick go check it, but there is a webinar and a podcast on this specific topic, which is different. Arlene's is going to be great too, and Arlene is going to do a webinar the end of the month, and she did a podcast. So there's discernment and therapeutic separation, intermingled but different topics. But therapeutic separation and agreement, there's a workbook coming.
You're not the first person to ask this question. And I can only imagine there's a world of support groups, a world of literature, a world of, I think, I just want to say this is concrete. This is really, okay, we need to sit down and decide, what are we going to do in this situation? How are you going to manage family? How are you going to manage kids? How are you going to, and how do we agree? And these are specific things, specific steps that you're going to do to make this work for both of you. And so it feels a little bit like, oh, what do we do? And I think you could write down, what do we do in terms of finances? What do we do in terms of kids? What do we do in terms of who we talk to and who we don't talk to? And you can do this after you're separated, but the more clarity you can have about what is the process of separation. We're going to call each other or we're not. We're going to go out once in a while, or we're going to only see each other in therapy. There are many, many decisions can be made. And I think the more concrete they are, the more successful you're going to be in something like this. Yeah.
Agree. No, yeah, it's like you have to have a plan. Like what is the plan? So I love it. Okay. And there's going to be a podcast with Lindsay Stanley and Stevie Hall coming up, but there's a webinar first. So check them out.
Tammy,
Join
how
us.
do you have time? How do either of us, well, I know my dog's going to start wanting that, but how do either of us really have time? We do a lot of self-care because you see us give a lot, but we give to ourselves a lot too. We take evenings off, we get a massage. Tammy, are you still on the surfboard? What are
I paddleboard, yes, and
paddleboard?
I paddled. I'm traveling right now. I'm not doing self-care. I'm doing helping family members move. So that is not self-care, but I paddled on Friday morning before work. So yes, I do. So yeah, yeah,
Thank you folks for joining us. And one of the things, Tammy, that you said over and over again is there are a lot of resources. And I really encourage you to not be alone. Every spouse, there are 100 spouses sitting in a group somewhere who are trying to figure this out. Don't do this by yourself. I know it's embarrassing. I know you're uncomfortable. You can, you can do, where is that? You can do this. You do that and go to a group. You don't have to show your face. You don't have to tell your name, but you can listen to what other people are saying. And I've heard, I don't fit in with those losers. Well, looks like a duck, talks like a duck. Look for the things you have in common with the people who are sharing and not the things you don't have in common.
yeah.
So good to see you,
And they're
Tammy.
not losers. The people that are working on changing and healing,
That's right.
we say stick with the winners. They're the winners. Their lives are changing in a good way, just like the alumni retreat that you were
And
talking
everyone
about.
here
Yeah,
is
yeah,
because
absolutely.
they're sitting here and listening. All right.
Thanks,
Bye.
Dr.
My dog
Rob.
is so
Bye.
happy.
Bye, everyone. Thank